Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session, Lifelike, Emotive, and Rigorous, How We Know Synthetic Personas Really Work. I'm Quirk's editor, Joe Ridholm, and before we get started, let's quickly go over the ways you can participate in today's discussion. You can use the chat tab to interact with other attendees during the session, and you can use the Q&A tab to submit questions to our presenter today during the session, and they'll answer as many as we have time for at the end during the Q&A portion. Our session today is presented by Toluna. Renee, take it away.
Thanks for having us, Joe. Thanks everybody for joining. Today I'm going to talk about Toluna Synthetic Personas and much of the validation work that we've done, parallel tests, other sorts of analysis that we've done. This is sort of a companion piece to something we did in December where we talked about how they were created. So I'm not going to spend as much time on how personas are created because I really want to talk about validation today. So the one thing to know is that on any page where you see this symbol during this presentation, it will indicate that all or some of the results are from Toluna Synthetic Personas. So we don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We will show results from parallel tests, and you'll see this symbol, but I'll call out, okay, this is both synthetic and humans being compared. All right, so let's level set, though, in terms of the word personas gets used in a lot of different ways. So let me tell you what Toluna Synthetic Personas are, what their key attributes are. So first of all, we set out to work on quantitative research and being able to put individual level personas together in a sample. So our personas do not reflect a segment or a group. They're actually have individual level diversity, and you'll see in a minute, or I'll explain in a minute why that is. We set out to solve the quant challenge. We probably will move to qual at some point. It's on our roadmap, but we really wanted to try to solve the challenge of quant and synthetic survey taking and response generation. This is where I can explain that part of the way we get the diversity, so we're not creating digital twins. We are not creating, taking observed full profiles of our panelists. We're actually using a small snippet of a few, about 10 or 12 variables, an anonymized seed profile. And from that, using retrieval augmented generation, large language models, actually also a really important machine learning model that we've built, and we're predicting the additional attributes. So that is one difference as well. We're not creating digital twins. This doesn't reflect a specific known person, but it is, because it's retrieval augmented generation with guidance and guardrails, it does reflect a plausibly existing individual. And then in terms of how we generate the responses, our personas operate within an agentic system. So it's not prompt-based, it's not a single prompt. It's not just one or two prompts. There's this full agentic system that includes a lot of checks and balances before the answer is even given. So just a little bit of background, but again, I can't on this presentation go too much into right now how they're created. We can talk about that Q&A if you'd like. All right. What do we currently offer in terms of synthetic personas? And this isn't a sales pitch. It's just so you know where the validation testing has been, most of it that we've done. We have Act Instant AI, which is a copy pre-testing solution that uses 100% synthetic personas. It's automated end-to-end. And we have a rapid claims screening solution that also uses 100% synthetic personas. So much of the validation, not all, but much of it that you'll see will come from these as we validated these two solutions. All right. We often get asked, can personas have emotions? So that's what I want to address first. The first thing, and people kind of get a kick out of this, it's also a little, can be a little disconcerting to realize that behind the scenes, our personas grumble about poorly designed surveys just the same way humans do. So they have think of it almost like a whiteboard. They have a place, personas have a place where they can, say things about what's occurring while they're taking the survey. You can see this one that talks about, I'm getting very, very, very annoyed with answering the same question. We intentionally gave the personas the same question, and the persona just kept adding the word very each time they were getting more and more frustrated. Now, they will always answer honestly because that's one of their goals, but they do have emotions. You can also see them grumbling about a survey being too long. My bad back is starting to act up again. So that was a persona that had arthritis in there among their profile attributes. And then we weren't really expecting this, but we also had a persona that was a non-drinker as a profile attribute who said, I really think this brand should avoid showing a bottle of beer inside its product because it's triggering. So they have emotions, they have reactions. As humans could as well. Another aspect, if you want to think about emotions and personas, this is showing for emotional. Sorry, I thought I turned those off. This is showing for advertising, emotional resonance. So what you have on the left-hand side is you have percent of global ads that were coded by humans. This was some work we did entirely separately about a year ago, coded by humans as to whether those ads have an emotional storyline. And as you would expect, television ads tend to have a higher percentage of them tend to have a more emotional storyline. There's often more room for the narrative and the narrative arc. What you see on the right-hand side, and you see the symbol down there for the synthetic personas, what you see on the right-hand side is that the synthetic personas, when they talked about, or when they were asked to provide information about whether this ad was resonating emotionally, a similar pattern. Basically, TV ads, they recognize that those have the highest emotional narrative content. TikTok, Instagram Reels, they recognize as having the least. So just another angle on, can they handle emotions? The third piece of evidence I'll show you, this was a particular study we did. This was use that claim screening, and you can actually screen other things. You can screen messages. It's got a max diff trade-off, two max diff trade-off exercises in it. So in this particular one, the client wanted to understand emotional associations to the brand, and gave them a trade-off exercise with a list of 30 emotions or feelings, depending on how you define the word emotion, emotions or feelings. And when we looked at the parallel test with humans, we had in the rankings that came out of the max diff, we had a 0.86 correlation between the way the humans made the trade-offs about the emotions and the way the personas made the trade-offs about emotions. In this particular case, we had the top two were also exactly the same. And what's particularly impressive to me about this one is that I can't reveal the brand, but I can tell you that it makes sense that they would want to know what emotions are associated, because there's been some challenges for them. So the emotions range from everything like from positives, satisfied, appealing, joy, all the way down to like disgust and contempt. So just three pieces of evidence coming from different directions. Yes, personas can have emotions, they can recognize emotion, and they can associate emotion with brands. All right. Next question we actually also get asked a lot is, what about cultural differences? How do we build cultural differences, and do these personas really have cultural differences? So we do build a rich, deep backstory of life events into each persona. And what I'm showing you here is for Brazil and the United Kingdom, we pulled out the dimension that's related to what these personas, what a sample of these personas basically have in their backstory related to community. So they have many other themes in their backstory, but related to community. And what you can see is that for Brazil and the United Kingdom, very different. Um, as you would expect, family you can see particularly important for Brazil. What you've got, or the way I interpret the United Kingdom, is that tension that some countries have between traditional ways and more inclusivity, diversity in their community environment. So this just gives you a little example in the aggregate. What we also have on, I'll show you on the next slide here, is these differences are actually even at the regional level within countries. So this particular one, these are two personas, synthetic personas, not human beings. These are a portion of their backstory. And because they live in different geographic regions within the US, what you can see is that they have different elements in their backstory, including for Celine, who is a persona associated with the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. It talks about how technology and energy sectors have been very important there. The Hispanic community has grown. The area's, kind of competitive spirit. Whereas Ronan, or Mr. Parker, he's coming from the plains section of the Midwest. He's seen a lot of agricultural changes, and he has a lot of core values around resilience and hard work. So the question we get is, how do you account for cultural differences in personas? One of the ways that we do that, not the only way, but one of the ways is with these very rich backstories, and you can see that they are actually different. All right. Another question we often get asked is, do you allow them to make errors? So we've built them to have high accuracy and high consistency, but we've intentionally not made that perfect, even though we could. We don't want to over-engineer it. As we talk with clients, that's one of the things clients ask us is, can they make errors like humans can? So what I'm showing you here, this is just the test of three things. So first of all, they have in their profile attribute, in their profile itself, whether they're a primary grocery shopper. So that question, are you the primary grocery shopper for your household? Yes, no, or you share the responsibility. We then ran a survey, just a short survey, but in Q1 of that survey, we asked them about primary grocery shopper, but we used a different wording. How would you describe your role, etc.? Primarily responsible, share responsibility. And then at question 6 in the survey, we asked them about primary grocery shopper again, and we asked it in the exact wording of their attribute. So what you can see is that when you've got different wording, the attribute versus different word in the survey, they provided the same response 91% of the time. When it's exactly the same wording, 97% of the time. And when it's the two survey questions, so not the attribute, but the two survey questions, about 92% of the time. And we see these range, this is just one example, but we see these range from about 88 to 98% of the time. So yes, they can make errors. Another place they can make an error. So you heard me reference max diff before. They do have the ability to make transitivity errors. Now they don't quite make as many of them as humans because we like to improve the accuracy, but they absolutely can make those errors. All right, so they have lifelike survey taking behavior. Some folks ask us about the test retest reliability. That's also quite high. This is showing you for ranking questions. So we're not using the same personas here. It was two different samples of personas. And in the ranking questions, we saw retest correlations of 0.85 on the max diff. And what this means when it says with a smaller number of items, That's actually referring to how many items we allowed to be in the trade-off exercise. So in this case, it was 4. And you can see test retest reliability high there as well. So there's also lifelike survey taking behavior as well. But again, not perfect. We're trying not to over-engineer these at all. So now we'll move to parallel testing. We've done quite rigorous parallel testing for the 2 solutions that I mentioned earlier. So first, if you take advertising. So this is based on over almost 5,500 ads across countries and different formats. What we find is that when we look at we have a big database of advertising, historical database. So when we look at the ads that humans thought were strong and the ads that humans thought were weak, and we basically look at that in terms of quintiles, we compare that to the ads that personas thought were strong or personas thought were weak, and that match rate overall across these countries is 85%. It's a bit higher in 6 or so countries there, Australia through Vietnam and the US, a little bit lower in Indonesia and Mexico. But if you were thinking about, an R-squared from a model, or if you're thinking about a predictive model, you definitely want it to be in, 0.7 or above, 0.75 or above. So these are very high match rates. What I can tell you is there's no, hey, a weak ad is flipping up to being the strongest ad or vice versa. There's none of that. Where the mismatches occur are kind of in that muddy middle. So it could be that the humans might have put an ad in the 3rd quintile and the personas put it in the 2nd, or vice versa. It's really in that area where you'd want to look at additional diagnostics as well. All right. So this is related to then the claims or message testing, the trade-offs that I was speaking about. Again, what we're showing here are parallel test results. So the synthetic is coming from the personas, and humans are the same test run with humans. At this point, we've probably done more than 200 of these, but this slide is based on 200 tests across countries. And what you can see are the global average. And again, what we're looking at here are, in this case, we're looking at the correlations for the results from the max diff. You could think of it as, the absolute or the net rankings, basically. So you see that the global average, 0.77. Some countries, Italy and US, been a little higher. Brazil, Indonesia, UK, a little bit lower. We actually won't roll out a country if we're not routinely getting above 0.65. So this is an average, but it's not like it's an average of 0.2 and 0.9. We just won't roll out a country, and we actually won't roll out a certain kind of stimuli. For example, we don't actually do names right now because we haven't been able to get the correlations to where we feel comfortable. I thought you might want to see as well, what about different dimensions that they might do trade-offs on? So you can see that these results are pretty stable across different things. You might, is it most least important, most least relevant? Are you most likely, most or least likely to buy, subscribe, etc.? So those correlations of those rankings are pretty stable. It's not like we're doing well on one trade-off type, but not another. And then when you think about the stim or the attributes that are being traded off, you see for features, claims, ingredients, those are pretty stable as well. I probably should have had an all other here, so shame on me, but these are pretty stable, quite stable as well. So that's a little bit more on the parallel testing and how we dig into this across the different dimensions. We also said that we'd talk a little bit about some best practices, what to do, not to do. So where we have found personas shining so far, they are really good at ranking and max diff trade-off tasks. So that's actually was the first solution we rolled out a year ago because we saw how good they were at that. They're tireless. So earlier I showed you, even when they're presented the same question again and again, they might grumble about it, but their goal is to provide an honest answer based on their profile. So you don't get those kind of quality issues that are due to fatigue or inattentiveness. Personas cannot, speak to humans. They can't post on social media. So, when you have sensitive concepts, sensitive items that you wouldn't really want to put in front of humans, or you're concerned they might get out. Another interesting thing, at least in our system, I don't know if everyone would work this way or not, but you basically get monadic testing, even though you can use what we would think of as a sequential design. So our personas don't carry any memory from study to study. And then in our advertising testing, they actually don't carry any memory about a prior ad from block to block in the survey. So we allow clients to test 10 ads at a time, but even though it looks like a sequential design, you're basically getting monadic testing because there's no memory going from one cell to another. By the way, what the other interesting thing about that that one of my colleagues brought up is you're not only getting monadic testing, but you're actually getting monadic testing with the same demographics, because these are the same personas in this particular case. They just don't have memory going across. So it gives you a little less variance than you would see with humans. What are some watch outs? So we do know on believability, if believability is a trade-off dimension for max diff, Toluna synthetic personas are very hard graders. So those results don't always line up with the human results. They tend to be harder graders. And when we provide open ends and ask them why they ranked it in that way, what we often see is references to the language sounded too flowery, or it sounded like marketing jargon. So they seem to more harshly grade things that sound too much like marketing. So they harshly grade them in a max diff. What they are better at, though, is if you use believability as ranking and ask them to rank the top 5 that are most believable, that works fine. Another watch out, context is key. So, for example, in a max diff design and a claims testing design, you might show humans a product beforehand so that they understand what the product is before they make the trade-offs. With humans, you could show an image only and let the humans make a lot of assumptions. And with personas, you get much better accuracy if you provide an image. Well, you could provide the text only, but an image and the text description are a must. Giving them an image only leads them to sometimes make too many assumptions, which leads me to my last point here, which is you should help them in other scenarios avoid assumptions. So, for example, in flavor tests, if you're testing, flaming hot mocha iced latte, all right, a human is probably going to make some decent assumptions about what's going on there. But it's better to give the personas, you get higher accuracy if you give them a little bit of context about what the top 2 or 3 key ingredients are. Non-complex flavors, you don't even have to give them that. So flavor testing is not, but if you get to these complex flavors, especially if they're described a bit more in marketing language than they are in terms of the ingredients, it's best to give them a little bit more information about the top couple of ingredients in there. All right. So just some closing thoughts, and then we can move into questions. So we said we were going to talk to you about how they're lifelike. Ours happen to have 250 plus profile attributes and a very rich and diverse backstory that includes the cultural backgrounds. They have room to make mistakes, and all of that contributes to more lifelike responses from the personas. In terms of emotive, yes, they are able to express emotions, identify emotional resonance, and they can associate emotions with ads. So, yes, on emotions. And then, we've tested, especially for the 2 solutions we've rolled out, and we've got other things behind the scenes that we're currently testing as well. But for the 2 solutions we've rolled out, you can see 5,500 comparisons for advertising, more than 200 now, parallel tests for the claims or message testing. So we hope that through a presentation like this and just through this sheer amount of testing that we've done, that as our clients use this, it brings them additional confidence to move forward. And so lifelike, emotive, and rigorous, we would argue that, yes, indeed, Toluna Synthetic Personas are indeed that. So I think we're going to take questions now, and Joe, take it away.
Sounds good. The questions are rolling in here, which is always good. lots of curiosity. There were 2 here that are sort of similar, just asking about, the fact that we as consumers make irrational decisions, and they're just asking about, does this approach, is it able to inject some irrationality or some randomness, to just sort of simulate what consumers would normally do, what human consumers would normally do?
Yeah, great question. So randomness, yes. That's some of the ways that when I talked about the intransitivity errors that they can make in a max diff. So randomness, yes. One of the things I think that we feel like we don't know yet at Toluna that needs more testing is can a persona, or not can they, under what circumstances can a synthetic persona have a system 1 instinctive reaction? Okay, so yes, randomness, yes, but I think the jury's still out on what are the circumstances where a persona can mimic that kind of instinctual response.
Sure. Another question sort of along those lines, asking about a personas, could they incorporate past experience that's quite specific, like I bought this brand of beer and I didn't like it, XYZ, any ways to sort of have a past experience sort of influence their current answers, I guess?
Yeah, so I only focused on the cultural backstory, but the backstories are quite rich. Now, it's not necessarily going to get to the every brand and their negative experiences. The way that what we have planned for the future with personas. So right now, personas don't learn anything from study to study. That will never, that we're not going to change because we don't want one client's data affecting another. But we do want them to have longer term memory, including things like having a media diet, having a more context on a daily basis about products and brands. But part of the way that I answer the question that was just asked is just because something's not in the profile attribute doesn't mean that they can't make a prediction about it. So I remember one of the first client meetings I was ever in, that client asked me about paper towels. And they said, well, how can they have preferences about paper towels if there's no attribute for them about paper towels? So the example I like to give is, let's say that you as a human being were unaware that there are paper towels where you get a full sheet and paper towel rolls where you can rip off a half sheet. So you've never seen that before. As a human being, what you're going to do if you're trying to make a decision between those two is you're going to take information you already have, which is actually what personas are doing. So as a human being, you're going to be thinking about things like, And by the way, you might just pick it up accidentally. So I'm not saying everybody's thinking this through, but your preferences over time are basically going to be influenced by things like, do I think the world should be more sustainable? Maybe I want the half sheet. Oh, wait a minute, though. I've got 2 toddlers and they're always spilling things. So maybe I want the whole sheet. Am I price conscious? Do I have, how much cooking do I do that requires this? So they have the personas have attributes like that, and they're going to reason from those to basically make their prediction. So I think back to the original question about experiences, I think the fact that personas don't experience every brand doesn't mean that they can't reason with their profile about what their experiences might have been. That said, you're not going to hear from me that you should start using personas if if you're a person who takes objects into a central location because tactile research is important, then you should keep doing that. Personas are not going to be for every situation.
Right. And I think you just touched on this a little bit too, but there's a question here just asking about how a synthetic persona would incorporate recent events, like if tariff laws or the tax breaks or change in the government or something like that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So currently, what we do is there's 2 things that we do. So one is when you get a sample of personas, we have created a pool of existing personas, but we've done that primarily. We don't intend to build 80 million personas and keep them in a pool necessarily. We've built up about 1 million right now, and we've done that primarily for speed reasons. So when you come in and you have a project, a portion of your sample, your personas come from the existing pool. That helps with the turnaround time but we actually generate the other portion on the fly. Really proud of our developers for creating this ability to generate it on the fly. So what that means is that you're getting fresh profiles being built. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to know who won yesterday's Super Bowl. Okay. And obviously the Super Bowl wasn't yesterday. So who won the AFC playoffs, right? They're not going to know those sorts of things. So that's where the media diet becomes more important. What I can tell you, though, is what's really interesting on the tariff one is we did some testing where we had an internal survey we were doing on the tariffs and the economic situation across, 10 or 12 countries. And so we tested with the personas just in general, like how are they answering? And then we gave them a summary, just use like ChatGPT ourselves to make a summary of the past month's economic conditions. And as soon as they got that context, we didn't put it into their memory, but we put it into the survey as context. As soon as they got that context, the results lined up between the humans and the personas. So we're pretty sure that this media diet, we've seen some academic literature on that as well, will solve a lot of those challenges.
Sure. Question here too, just asking about what are some of the best tests to use synthetic personas for? Would it be best for product testing, ad testing, as opposed to, experience or attitude related types of testing?
I wouldn't say attitudes are off the table at all. And again, on the experiences piece, it's not going to be an all or nothing. So we've got, look, we're rolling things out as we feel like they're fully validated, but we test a lot of other things behind the scenes. So I'm not worried that that personas will never be able to predict based on making some assumptions about what their experiences would have been. What I think we need to care about more is where's the boundary of that. So that's going to be my answer right now. Is it's early days, and so again, if something's very tactile and you need that tested, use humans. I don't think we need to think about personas as doing everything. But I don't think, and we get asked this, I don't think this, oh, they can't have experiences, therefore they can't predict about them. I don't actually think that's going to be the constraint that everybody thinks it is, but I do think that we'll find that it works well in some situations and not in others. But I can't tell you because it's early days.
Sure. Two questions here just about specific groups, like talking to financial advisors in the B2B setting or healthcare providers. Can you kind of get that specific in terms of assigning a persona, like you're an oncologist or you're an OBGYN or something like that?
Yeah, so we'll get there. We've created the personas right now to just be general consumers because we're trying to scale the business, and that's a big area of demand, right? And so when we do, for example, the rapid claims testing, you screen for category users the same way that you would with humans. Now, that's actually kind of inefficient. We know that it's kind of inefficient to screen them. So we will be building, and it's actually related to that ability to create things on the fly. We will be building more capabilities so that on the fly, you can request that your sample be 100% of mothers of babies, for example. B2B, we get asked about a lot. It's important to us, but I also think that there's a lot more additional validation that would have to be done. So let me say it this way. IT decision makers, might be earlier for us. Medical doctors might be a way lot later.
Sure. Great question here. Just about, is the comparison to human data the right comparison?
Yeah. We talk about this all the time internally. So right now it absolutely is, because you need to compare to what clients are using as the ground truth. I think similar to the transition from face-to-face and telephone to online, I think we're going to get more and more evidence about what personas do better or do differently, but is still useful. So let me give you an example. Believability. If they're hard graders and you know that, and you pass the claim or the message passes the test of believability with personas, well, then it's really passed something because they're hard graders. Mm-hmm. So do we want to fix those things and make them less hard graders, or do we actually want to take advantage of that in a different way? In other words, have different benchmarks than we've had in the past. I think in addition, if you think back to the transition from face-to-face to online, we found, that online was a bit more anonymous. So certain behaviors were talked about more honestly. I think we're going to see a bit of that as well. So we're not expecting personas to always be 100% like humans. And actually, the other thing I would say, I'll extend this question into a different topic that I like to talk about. I actually think that if the industry only thinks of synthetic personas, the individual level ones, if we only think of them as a sample source, we're actually going to miss a huge part of the value. The way I think of them now, and a couple years ago, maybe I was thinking a bit more like the sample source, but as I see what they can do, I think of them as measurement devices and prediction instruments. And so if you ask yourself, what can't you do? What can you not do with humans? What are you constrained by ethics? What are you constrained by timing? What can you do? What can't you do with humans that you can do with personas? That opens up a whole range of possibilities. So, sample sourcing, interesting, important, super useful, but thinking about, well, just as a simple example, being able to run what looks like a sequential monadic study and get monadic results, You can't do that with humans because they can't wipe out their memory after each block, at each survey block. So, so yeah, that's where I think also some of the real advantages are going to come.
Sure. And I know we talked a little bit about this in the B2, using it in the B2B setting is still a little bit in the ways off, but there's just a question here about where, synthetic respondents might add value in the B2B research setting, and, what sort of limitations or risks there might be for using them in that situation.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to comment on that because we haven't really done a lot of testing in that. But I think that I think one of the advantages they're going to have is they're going to understand the jargon from the get-go. But I also think that one of the disadvantages they might have, and again, I'm speculating here, so if anybody quotes me like Renee says this won't work, that's not what I'm saying, is they may not have enough information, not that they don't understand, they may not have enough information about the corporate dynamics of decision making. That might be part of the context. So in other words, if you're an IT decision maker, what you tell us you're going to do is not just your personal preference, it's also related to politics and organizational dynamics. So they might have to be given more context like that.
Couple of questions also, just again, I think you touched on this too, but just about how the personas are set up. How do you determine their personalities and characteristics? And are you trying to make them representative of a company's customer base or more, Joe consumer, more generic consumer? Talk a little bit about that process.
Sure. So won't go into a ton of detail because it's better if you can see parts of it visually, but I'll just say that we build personas. So when I said there are 250 attributes or more, plus a very rich backstory, we build that in layers. And so what that means is that the data structure that we start out with, I mentioned, is like a anonymized seed profile of about 15 or so variables from a real human. Toluna has panel data from years and years, 25 plus years. So an anonymized seed profile. We then build a layer that is basically like product ownership, interests, media usage. We kind of think of it as you've got this skeleton. We put some muscle on it. We then build a layer that is also personality traits, and we call that kind of the heart layer or the passion layer, how they communicate, communication styles, values that they have. And then the fourth layer is to what degree they have memory, which right now they only have memory for that particular session. So, and in the ad testing, we wipe the memory actually for blocks of it. So we think about it as those layers because we're trying to build a persona that has some holistic characteristics. But as we build the layers, the attributes that are already built, they become part of if you know what RAG is, retrieval augmented generation, they become part of the inputs to the very next variable that gets predicted. And those variables get predicted in a random order. So somebody asked about randomness. That's one place randomness comes in. So for those of you who are, you don't have to have a statistics background. Just think of it this way. If we have an Excel spreadsheet of data, that data has a particular structure to it. And what I mean by that is, yes, it has rows and columns, but actually when you look at, statistics from it, the reason that purchase intent can predict imperfectly, but can predict certain things is because that data has a structure to it. So this whole building up is basically take the inputs you have and it creates a data structure that's not deterministically created, but that has to be plausibly correlated with the information that's already there. So you want a record or an individual record that has integrity You don't have any non-smokers who buy cigarettes, for example, that sort of thing. So that's how they're built. But what's also really important to know is that they don't operate independently on just a prompt based. So they operate within this agentic system. So the persona can give an initial prediction, but looking at its profile, give an initial prediction of what its answer to that survey question would be. But there's a whole set of checks and balances to determine, is that consistent with the profile? There's an agent that does that. Is that consistent with the prior answers in the survey? How's the sample balance looking? So as much as the personas, because they're kind of lifelike, get people's energy up, getting the accurate answers actually involves breaking the problem down with different agents, having checks and balances, and then doing the validation.
Sure.
I got off track a little bit, so did I answer that question?
That's all right. No, we've actually run out of time. I appreciate all the questions out there, and thank you, Renee, and thank you, Toluna, for all the good information today. And most importantly, thanks to everybody out there for being with us today. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.